Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Planning and Consultation Committee meeting. I'd like to welcome you all and welcome everyone here tonight to Council's Planning and Consultation Committee meeting, and wish to advise the meeting will be live streamed and recorded. The live stream and video recording will be made publicly available via YouTube and on Council's website. Nillumbik Shire Council respectfully acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners of the country on which Nillumbik is located, and we value the significance of the Wurundjeri people's history as essential to the unique character of the Shire. We pay tribute to all First Nations people living in Nillumbik, give respect to elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to all First Nations people. We respect the enduring strength of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and acknowledge the ongoing impacts of past trauma and injustices from European invasion, massacres and genocide committed against First Nations people. We acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people hold a deep and ongoing connection to this place. We value the distinctive place of our First Nations people in both Nillumbik and Australia's identity, from their cultural heritage and care of the land and waterways to their ongoing contributions in many fields, including academia, agriculture, art, economics, law, sport and politics. And we move on to apologies. We only have one apology tonight, and that is from Councillor Egan. So I'm looking for someone to move the motion. Yes, thank you, Councillor Mayor, I should say.
Thank you. That the apologies be noted for Councillor Egan.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Stockman. Would either councillor like to speak to that motion? I will put that motion to the vote. All in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. We move on to disclosure of conflicts of interest. Are there any councillors who wish to disclose a conflict of interest tonight? I'll take that as a no, and just remind everyone that should there be a conflict of interest, the councillor should repeat that disclosure of interest prior to the item. We move on to confirmation of minutes. Do I have a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes, please?
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Mayor Eyre. I will now put that motion to the vote. All in favour?
Do I need to read that out?
Oh, yes, you do.
Yeah,
I do apologise. I've raced right ahead. Please read
That's
out
right.
the motion.
So the recommendation is that the committee, acting under delegation from council, confirms the minutes of the Planning and Consultation Committee meeting held on Tuesday, the 12th of April 2022.
Thank you very much. Seconder? Great. Would the mover and the seconder like to speak to this?
No, thank you.
All right. In that case, I'll put that to the motion. Put that to a vote. I think I got the wording right. And we'll call that unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, we're moving on to the first of the officers' report. The first report tonight is PCC 016-22 Draft Asset Plan. We don't have any speakers for this report. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Do we have a would you like to read the recommendation of the motion?
Yes, so the recommendation is that the committee, acting under delegation from council, firstly acknowledges and notes any submissions received from community members who provide any feedback on the Draft Asset Plan 2022 to 2032 as per the attachment. And part 2 requests a further report be presented at its June 2022 council meeting, recommending endorsement of the final version of the Asset Plan 2022 to 2032.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Ramcharan. Okay, Councillor Duffy, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you. Just a few quick words. So, you know, in the draft asset plan, many things have been considered. The impact of climate change is one of those. Council has many different components that we require to keep operating in the Shire, and everyone likes to see playgrounds and transport, shelter, transport. I suppose there's in the asset plan, it's really neatly summarised and it's put into 3 sections. So our assets are divided into the transport network, a buildings portfolio, drainage network and an open spaces network. I think the thing that really surprised me was that when I first became a councillor was knowing that there is $6 million worth of drainage works that we need to do. And with this asset management plan, the numbers kind of really bring home the capital and the infrastructure that is in the Shire that kind of enables us to go about as residents and people that work here, enjoying the Shire and what's available because of what we've got. So if you just take a look at the transport network in the draft asset plan. It talks about the transport network assets being $393 million worth, the buildings portfolio $173 million worth, a total value of drainage $131 million, and open space $39 million. So, it's really significant. These are big numbers, and we need to make sure that the assets that we have are cared for and looked after, so that the services are reliable for now, but also into future generations. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to Yama Phillips, the director of our infrastructure and operations team, and all the people that work in that area, and across the team of council officers for the work that goes into ensuring that our services and these supports that are in place, these infrastructure supports, work for us. So I think that that's probably the key thing that I'd like to say. They're big numbers. I suppose there's one thing that has impressed me with the way that the officers approach this task is they look at the life cycle. They look at, what do we need to do to keep these assets current, but what do we need to do to make sure that they are going to have longevity into the future. And so there are some things that, there's like a traffic light system. In the report, you'll notice that there's green, amber and red. And if we were to look at this current state of assets, there are some playgrounds that are kind of at the end of their life. And so we're making decisions as to what do we do with those things? How do we upgrade them? So the asset plan kind of really does underpin a lot of the work that council does. So I'll leave it at that, just to say it's very rare that we get no submissions, and I note that there was nobody from the community who actually put in any feedback on this item. So it's not too late to share your opinions on various assets, what they look like. I invite the community to do that to us individually as councillors in the day-to-day course of our business. But for the draft asset plan, officers will put forward back to us what they would like to see as a final version at the meeting in June, and I look forward to talking more about it at that stage. So I'll sign off for now.
Thank you. Councillor Duffy. Councillor Ramcharan.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Payne. And I certainly concur with everything Councillor Duffy said. She's definitely got her head around the document, which is good to see. I'm not surprised that we didn't get any submissions on this one. It is certainly a dry document. And I think either people were so excited after they read it that they were that they forgot to make their submissions, or perhaps they they weren't all that interested. But actually, if you have a look at what's in there, there is quite a lot that really is relevant to people. We're actually laying out the service standards of our assets. For example, if you're interested in open space, well, we're setting a standard that residents have access to recreational trails, ovals and playgrounds within reasonable distance from their homes. A standard that trails and playgrounds are to be accessible and PRAM compliant. So that's actually really relevant to a lot of people. So while the name asset plan sounds quite boring, this really is quite an important document. Another example, if you're interested in footpaths, new footpaths are to be acquired in areas where there is no footpath provision. Expand the current footpath and trail networks to accommodate missing links. So there are some really important strategies in there. It links to the Climate Action Plan, which is a really important document in terms of how we manage our assets and make sure that they are doing what they need to do to reduce our carbon footprint, and also making them resilient to the impacts, the eventual impacts of climate change. It talks about the impact of COVID-19, so needing an increased cleaning regime in our buildings, requiring more ventilation, and the fact that that's going to increase operational and maintenance costs, and that's something that council really needs to be aware of, especially for future budget cycles. So yeah, very well written document. I think there was a lot of thought that went into this, and hopefully no news is good news when it comes to not receiving submissions from the community. But I do encourage everyone out there to actually have a look at this plan and really get your head around what it means for the community, because it really does set out some important strategies that will really impact the way that council runs a lot of assets that are used by community every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ramcharan. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak to the motion? Councillor Stockman.
Yeah, I'd just like to say this is a good plan, and also thank Yelmar and his team. We've got some good feedback coming from Yarrambat with the streetscape that recently has just been taking place.
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. Any other councillors hoping to speak to this? In that case, I will put the motion to the vote. All in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. The next report tonight is PCC 017-22, the 2022-2023 budget submissions. And we have at least 6 speakers listed for this report. And the first of which is Gavin Watson. Is Gavin Watson in the room? Okay, step on up, Gavin. You have the microphone here. If you just press the little go button, it should flash green, and you have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. My name's Gavin Watson. I'm here to talk about my budget response as an individual, but it's something I'm very passionate about from lived experience and my work at Diamond Valley Community Support as the Executive Officer there, but I'm here as an individual who works, lives and plays in Nillumbik. So thanks for your time and letting me talk. So in response to the next council budget, I'd like to see council provide some funding for basic social supports for those who are doing it tough in the local area. Council has a lot of support towards wellbeing and inclusion programs, and it's fantastic that there's a lot available in our shire for that, but there's no crisis supports, and people dealing with personal and financial crisis is not something new. It's been an issue within Nillumbik, as most LGAs around the country, for many years, but it's never been addressed appropriately. Now, through COVID and through the crisis, the number of people experiencing crisis has grown, with the common issues being food security, housing security, family violence and mental health. The response to this crisis in Nillumbik is being managed by charities and not-for-profits. So a report that was completed late last year by a group of 5 local organisations showed that more than 13,000 people had received food relief in a 12-month period in our local area, of which 53% resided in Nillumbik. So that's over 6,000 people. The agency I work with, which is Diamond Valley Community Support, we've also seen approximately 250 Nillumbik residents in that period facing either housing insecurity or actually sleeping rough. So it's hard to be a thriving and resilient member of the community if you're actually living day by day and you need to go out of the area for support. So for it to be necessary to support this sustainably, would like to see council offer some service agreements to the main agencies that are providing the basic living needs and crisis supports to the residents. As an example, and so this is just an example from my organisation, but we've provided over $250,000 of material aid in the past year alone. Now that's only material aid, that's not how much it costs to run our place. Approximately 60,000 of that has gone directly to Nillumbik residents. To give you an example, we're funded by DSS for Nillumbik for $14,000. So that's a shortfall of $46,000 that we've made up through our own social enterprises and donations and so forth. The other federally funded agencies for Nillumbik are located in Epping and Darebin, so we're the only one here. Once the basic needs are provided in a sustainable manner, that being food support, housing support, etc., then other services become available to the local residents and also rural Nillumbik that has lack of access to this support. So a crisis can occur to anyone. It only takes one thing to turn your world upside down. It's not a life choice that necessarily happens, and I'd like to see people getting support now, not in a month, not in 12 weeks, and not out of our area. So I love Nillumbik and I love the greenery and the recreation spaces, but I don't want to see anyone left behind, so we can all enjoy it. And you can't expect charities who are not funded and already stretched beyond their limits to support.
Gavin, I hate to cut you off, but we're at time.
That was the last bit.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Gavin?
Thank you.
All right. Now, so you're appearing on behalf of yourself and not on behalf of the... Yeah, because if that's the case, then we can ask some questions. So if councillors have questions of okay. Are there any councillors that have questions of Gavin? Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you for the work that you do, and I didn't realise who you were when we spoke earlier tonight, so I'm very supportive of the work Diamond Valley Community Services done, so thank you. You've just touched on just a tip of the iceberg with what you do. I heard on the radio this afternoon there was an interview in Frankston with a similar community support group, and they were explaining the difficulties that they are facing down there, and that the people who have been asking for help through their services. So it's not the way things used to be. It's, you know, you touched on it, that an emergency can come up or a crisis can come up at any time for anyone. You mentioned with council that you'd like some extra council support, and I'm just wondering two things. If you might be able to touch on the sort of things that you'd like to see in a service agreement with council. And the other bit, you mentioned your social enterprises. I'm familiar with some of those and with the markets that you run, but I'm wondering what social enterprises do you have other social enterprises that you'd like to see up and running, and ones that maybe council can assist you in delivering?
So from the point of a service agreement, I think any agency, whether it be Diamond Valley Community Support or a church, or the Second Bite services being offered down in Diamond Creek, they need to have the basics to be able to operate without, obviously, shutdowns through COVID, but just the basics, so it can always operate. It has to be able to sustainably operate. But you can't rely on two things. We love our volunteers. We've got 130 of them. We provide a huge amount of support, as they do, to the community, but you cannot rely on the basic social needs of your community to be based on volunteers and donations. Mm-hmm. So a service agreement needs to create the basics that allows it to operate from a day-to-day basis. Might not cover everything, but it does need to cover the basic things. And our Food Collective project has 20 agencies that are all sharing. It's for some reason, very oddly, a new process that no one understands about sharing things. So we've got 20 agencies that actually share food donations and receive food, so we all help each other. That needs $33,000 to operate a year, and we all work hard to get donations and so forth to make that happen. That all comes out of our pocket. As I said, for DVCS to support Nillumbik, we're $46,000 short a year. We've made a loss this year of $126,000 so far, trying to cover the need of the organisation. That's not something under normal circumstances my committee would allow me to do. But we are in unique times, so we've spread our financial year over a couple of year period and see what that looks like. So service agreement needs to cover the basics. Social enterprises, we run 2 op shops, one in McLeod, one in Diamond Creek, and we run 5 markets. So within Nillumbik, it's Hurstbridge Market and the Library Place, as it's been renamed, down in Eltham. And they're both small, and they do create a little bit of profit, and 100% of that profit all goes back to our programs. But we pay full rent at our op shops. We pay all our electricity. It's just like, well, we basically have separated our accounts into not-for-profit and for-profit. The for-profit gives money to our not-for-profit part of our organisation. Again, you're relying on the goodwill of my committee to support our local residents, and I think the basics need to be given to the organisation to just do it every day of the week. So I hope that answers you.
Yeah. So I've got one more question that's come from that, but I'll leave it to others if they'd like to ask a question first.
Any other councillors? Mayor.
Thanks, Gavin, for coming and for all the wonderful work that your organisation does and your passion. I just wanted to ask, you talked about crisis support, and I know you mentioned a few things, but I'm also wondering, is there any other way, if we weren't able to provide service agreements, is there anything else that council could do that could help support you to generate income? Like you talked about op shops and the markets. Is there anything else that we could be doing?
I mean, we get a lot of our finances through grants as well, and we've enjoyed those through Nillumbik. The issue we've got a lot of people experienced in writing those, and we're pretty good and fairly successful. But most organisations can't do that. They don't have the resources. They don't have the abilities to do it. You're never guaranteed to get it, and quite often you can only get it once. So, grants are great, but they tend to go in, they're for a purpose, and they go back out. So they're sort of net zero across the organisation. It just helps the community. Social enterprises take up 50% of my time. So it's great to be given the ability to grow them and so forth. That we love the fact that we can be a little bit independent. But like I said, we can't do it alone. Neither can we all rely on churches and so forth to do it. And we've got a great network that are all working on these problems. But at the same time, they're all working their butts off to find donations and do fundraisers and so forth, and to just have people who have nowhere to sleep. And we know people sleeping rough in Eltham, Diamond Creek, Hurstbridge. We've got community pantries we've put around that are 24/7, with 6 of those in Nillumbik. The 2 that get used the most are in Eltham and Hurstbridge. They're running out of donations. We can't fill them up with food quick enough to be supported. So, I don't necessarily have an answer exactly to your question. Any support we get can help, but that's why I'm sort of going back to, there needs to be just this little basic thing that agencies can draw on. It only has to be for 3 or 4 agencies. It doesn't have to be for everybody who does support. It's just the key ones that people can go to. We've kept our door open through COVID because it's hard to navigate these systems. And if you're in crisis, you're not necessarily even thinking straight anyway. So to be able to try and navigate the social supports in Victoria and Australia is very, very difficult. So we kept our doors open so they can walk in. And we're the only place that does it at the moment. So any help, particularly it just allows us to say, there's our budget, we've got the basic operations going, is sort of what we just like to know. It makes us sleep better at night if we know every day we're not hunting for just staying open. Everything else is better on top of that.
Thank you.
Any other councillors? Councillor Duffy?
Thank you, Gavin. In your submission, and I've highlighted what you wrote, you've said here, food security and housing security are basic human rights and are currently a major issue in Nillumbik. It's hard to be a thriving and resilient community if so many people are simply living day to day, which is kind of one of those cost of living issues, I suppose, is very topical at the moment with the election and conversations and just households getting through the day. My question to you is, who provides you with the money that you currently have to run your operations? And you mentioned to the Mayor that some of that is grant resourced. And what happens if you can't deliver the services that you provide?
To answer your question, we've been in existence 50 years, and I must admit I've only been in the job 2.5 and really need to thank the last 47.5 years of the organisation who have put aside money for a rainy day. And the rainy day came about 2.5 years ago. So we've basically made a call to do what's needed in the community to support it. So we're using funds that have been sitting in reserve for a while. 60% of our funding comes from our own enterprises. So we're 40% funded by some form of government or grant and 60% on our own accord. And we're trying to aggressively grow that 60% so that we can sustain what we're doing. We get money from DSS, so federal. We don't get any money from state, although we've had a couple of grants from DHHS. We get support from Banyule City Council, which helps us with some staffing costs to increase that from part-time to full-time for a couple of people. And then it's around grants and donations. We have magnificent partnerships with the likes of Lions and Rotary and some of the schools and so forth. So our operating costs is around, or last year was around $800,000 to $900,000 for the year. Where, as I said, 60% of that's coming from ourselves.
Just one last question here, Gavin. Thank you for the detail that you've been giving. I'm asking questions because it's really close to my heart and so serious, right? So you've mentioned that Banyule provide you some support in staffing. So with the shortfall that you mentioned that you encourage, so you've said that the funding that you get, it's about $14,000 covers is what you've kind of based for Nillumbik, but the expenses that you're incurring when you're looking at your breakdown is we're $46,000 short for Nillumbik. Is that, yep? So in looking for support from council and knowing that Banyule Council are giving you support in a way of helping you run your operation, would the best way for council to be able to look at what we might be able to do be assist you with money for grants or assist you for money to help you with the day-to-day cost of operations like staffing like Banyule have done?
Yeah, I think maybe in a perfect world, Banyule sort of taking care of staff, some staff, key staff going from part-time to full-time, and we've got the basics covered, if you like, from a staffing perspective. So we've obviously got programs, like I said, the food and grocery vouchers and so forth. We've got a shortfall, so they're material aid items. You know, if you probably had one council supporting the extra staffing costs you need, and then you've got another council that we work in supporting some of that material aid that we're short, then there's a nice, clear segregation between who's helping what aspect of our organisation, because we look after both and we don't separate. Everybody prior to my time, Nillumbik got less aid, if you like, than Banyule because of that funding model. But once I joined the organisation, I said, no, if you come in and you ask for help, you get help, and it doesn't matter where you live, and you get the same help. So, you know, I think if the councils can work that way as well.
And so are the customers just Banyule and Nillumbik? I know that these are just arbitrary borders for when people are in crisis, but is it mainly Nillumbik and Banyule, or is it Whittlesea? Like, what's the reach?
Yeah, we obviously have zones from an ER point of view. So when it comes to our community development, like we do Volunteers Hub, we've got a range of community development programs I'm not talking about tonight. So they're all Banyule and all Nillumbik. From emergency relief, we do North East Banyule. There's a zone that we do, and all of Nillumbik that we look after. Roughly it's a fairly accurate figure, but 8% of people are from out of area. Now, the out of area people are Darebin, Whittlesea, and occasionally Hume and Manningham. When we kept our doors open through the crisis, we were getting calls from Dandenong, from Broadmeadows. We had people from Sydney. Luckily weren't travelling to see us, but guy from Dandenong did. Because our doors were open, everyone else's doors were closed. And that's why I sort of just talked about, you know, you don't want to wait. If you haven't got food tonight, you don't want to ring up and say, oh yeah, no problems, you can come and see us in 2 weeks or 12 weeks. And that's what's happening. You want to be able to walk in and walk away with food. So even someone from Whittlesea we will serve when it comes to food, but we won't give monetary because we're not funded to do that and we're already at a loss. So.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you for that. If there are no further questions of councillors, I will ask for a mover. Oh, yes, you do. Councillor Stockman, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. I've just got one question for you, Gavin, and that pertains to the markets and just how much money you can make from markets, and if they're bigger, if you can make more money from them. And I just wanted to add, I know 2 of the markets in Banyule, Elder Street and Latrobe, which are quite big markets and they attract a lot of stalls, as opposed to maybe Eltham and Hurstbridge, which are a little bit smaller. But I know Banyule too. The 2 in Banyule aren't next to train stations, and we try to do things near train stations. But if there is a market for a market outside of those train stations, and it does bring in more stall holders, does that mean more money in your pocket?
Eventually. They do take a little while to set up, as in it probably takes about 12 months for something to be seen and start generating profit. We pour a lot of money into promotion. We treat that side as a for-profit organisation. So, you know, we don't expect to see much out of the first 12 months of something, but beyond that they do. So our little markets don't generate a huge amount, but combined, you know, it's nice to have. Kingsbury is obviously a massive market and it's once a week. So, you know, if we do get another market and it was weekly, we just got to be careful they don't start competing. You might gain in one and lose from another as well. So.
Sorry, I've got one last question. Talking about social enterprises here and looking at what council has in terms of assets, would a social enterprise that was around running a cafe be something that would generate a lot of enough money for you for day-to-day operations? If council was able to provide you with a venue that you could staff and then use as a social operation. This is just completely hypothetical. I'm just looking at how can social enterprises and council assisting you in that way.
We've only briefly looked at, you know, sort of cafes and food type thing. It's my wife's in that sector, and it's something I like to stay away from with risk, if you like. You know, the training and so forth. You know, there's a lot of work and a lot of effort, and you know, we're paying people and so forth, which then brings up our operational costs. So it's something that we've tended to try and go to market quickly or go to market easily, something we know, etc. So yes, certainly, but the only aspect I've looked in any detail from a food or restaurant perspective is to give money to restaurants who are doing it tough through COVID to provide food for our ER program. So. You know, that's not a social enterprise, but that's actually supporting a business, and we're getting free food to give out to people.
Thank you, Gavin. Thanks for that. Any other councillors have any questions? In that case, I will look for a mover for the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Ramcharan.
Yes, I'd like to move that the committee, acting under delegation from council... we've got more speakers.
I do apologise. I'm so sorry. I've jumped straight to the end and we've got a whole range of speakers here. Thank you, Gavin. My apologies, everyone. Number 2 is Eric Nuccia. I don't know if Eric has appeared tonight. In that case, we'll move further down the list to Sandra Orrig, co-president on behalf of the Wattle Glen Residents Association.
Hi, can you hear me? I pressed the right button?
Yes,
Okay.
indeed.
Tonight I'm speaking on behalf of the Wattle Glen Residents Association. The association's requests a very small adjustment to the 2022-23 council draft budget, suggesting an additional $5,000 to enable a preliminary evaluation of an important proposal for our community. Wattle Glen Residents Association proposal has very strong strategic justifications, and in the first instance requests an objective officer's appraisal and report to establish whether there exists a case for the proposal and potentially the preparation for a brief for further investigations, including the possible engagement of consultants. We don't know if this needs a budget amendment or if the allocation can come from council's open space reserves or another council department fund. Our proposal is for council to buy the rural zoned land known as 36 Manish Road in Wattle Glen, and the proposal pertains only to the rural conservation zoned land, which is approximately 11 hectares, and not the adjacent residential land that is for sale by the same owner. The association envisages that this land be used as a council reserve for people and for future and for nature. And of course, if council buys the land, it will be council's decision, and this will also be dependent on what is allowed within the land zoning. The association and community feedback so far believes the land is very strategic and important to Wattle Glen, and so much so that it should be in community ownership. Over the last couple of years, the land's been put up for sale, so council needs to be prepared should it be advertised at a realistic price. Hence, tonight, the Wattle Glen Residents Association requests that council please make a small adjustment to its budget to enable as soon as possible, in liaison with the local community, an objective officer's environmental and recreational appraisal of our proposal. This assessment would help ready council for 3 significant aspects. 1, the justification for state and federal government grant applications. 2, the best and informed position for council negotiating with the owner. And 3, identifying a realistic market price for the property. So that's really it from me, but if you've got, please contact Wattle Glen Residents Association for any further information.
Thank you, Sandra. And given that you're appearing on behalf of the Residents Association, I don't think we can ask any questions of you, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your
presentation. I will now ask Bill Lord to make his way to the microphone. Bill, I'm sure you're familiar with the protocol here. Okay.
First of all, I support the Wattle Glen Residents Association submission to the budget. In its unique way, the Residents Association submission can be seen as a Wattle Glen communities and Nillumbik Council's way to make a positive contribution, supporting biodiversity within our green wedge when actions for climate change are sorely needed. The request for a slight budget change to investigate the viability of purchasing vacant land for rehabilitation of its biodiversity potential could be a new budget initiative and need a amendment motion, etc., or council does have an open space reserve money there, and I imagine this would be an appropriate use if need be. This request is timely, as I understand. the next 2 years will see the Victorian State Government making Indigenous plant biodiversity a priority. Maybe grants, perhaps. Too often, looking after our green wedge means chasing up by council officers when something has gone wrong and part of the green wedge is threatened. The Residents Association proposal is a chance to be on the front foot for improving the environment and biodiversity for its own sake, not just doing repair work. Back in the 1970s, which I remember, Pepper's Paddock in Wattle Glen was an eroded horse paddock on the banks of the Watery Gully Creek and was advertised for subdivision with more housing intended. Thanks to the vision of the then Wattle Glen residents and of the Eltham Shire Council, as it was, or the Eltham Shire Councillors, I should say, this land was bought by council, and today the revegetation, playground, barbecue, along with the created wetland, make a real asset for recreation and particularly for the environment. Now, the Residents Association has that vision again and has already put in a lot of effort in forming the community and the council to consider council buying. The land is situated on Melbourne's urban growth boundary and has been vacant and unused since the late 1950s. At this stage, a small change to the draft may see an evaluation that leads to another Pepper's Paddock, or like the council reserve at Panton Hill, land essentially protected for biodiversity, environment and recreation for people.
Bill, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're just over time.
It's fine.
Thank you. So, are there any councillors with questions for Bill at this stage? Councillor Perkins.
G'day, Bill. Thanks for coming on.
Peter.
Sandra spoke of a realistic market price, and this is a question I've asked of a number of people and got a varied range of numbers. Certainly in the millions. But what's this property worth? What would be the cost to council in the initial purchase?
Well, that is what this is looking at, getting a way to do an evaluation to find out what it's worth. It might not be an easy job, or it may be a job that officers can do using their skills, but you have to start somewhere. I can tell you what the price was when the land was bought, 3 or 4 years ago, whatever it was. But
what was that?
It was 2.3 million, and that included 9 residential blocks. But I mean,
because at the end of the day, the sale price will be whatever the owner determines it to be.
it will be, and you don't assume that that the price has to be accepted. In fact, council, I think, are bound by having to work within limits of what it's worth. They can't just go and offer someone a heap of money, even if you had it.
Which we don't.
The CEO's nodding, so I'm close to the mark at least. Yes, that. But you got to start that process, and that's what this motion is saying. Well, look, we can't. Well, we'd like to, but it's very hard to turn around and say, okay, let's council, let's do it now without any evaluation. By doing it this way, a small amount of money, get that question perhaps answered, and anything else that $5,000 will provide.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Peter.
Any other councillors with questions? Councillor Ramcharan.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, and thanks, Bill, for bringing this to us. So just to confirm, you're suggesting that the residential zoned land of that block is to be cut off, and we don't purchase that, but we purchase the RCZ zoned land?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, yes. There was 9 blocks residential, 8, there's still 4 that haven't either been sold or work hasn't started. It's a bit vague just exactly what's happening. It depends on which planning page you go to, what you get told. But they're outside of the maps that we've been putting out to the community or whatever. It's just RCZ land. Yep.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So the other question, I don't know if you've seen the response from officers to some of the submissions that were made on this topic, but the submissions were asking for an extra 5,000 to do this investigation. What we've heard from officers is that it would be more like 40 to 50,000. So there's a big difference there. I guess what I want to get my head around is what are you thinking when you suggest putting this proposal together and for council to fund an investigation? What's the scope of that in your mind? Because I'm wondering if it's a case that you've got an idea of a small investigation, officers have got an idea of a big one. What's the scope of that investigation that you're proposing for us to fund through this budget?
No, well, we're very much the lay people here without, and we don't have a committee who are particularly skilled in any of the things that would be great if you did have. But we just, quite honestly, look at the principle of what we've got here, and it's a principle that is out there being proactive and proactive for the environment and biodiversity, etc., as well as for trails and the other things that you've heard about that can be included. But really, yes, we are dependent upon the officers looking at that sort of thing. And as I was just repeating myself, but rather than trying to go for everything at once, at least let's go and see realistically what money is needed, but also appreciate what is there. It's not, it's triple bottom line. It's not just money. It should not be the issue.
Thanks, Bill.
So no answer really. Yeah.
No, it leaves it open to us to figure out. But
provide
that's
the experts.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other councillors? The question, Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Bill, thank you for your presentation tonight. And thank you for the history lesson. I didn't realise that Pepper's Paddock was once in private hands and that was put up for sale, and that the council of the day was proactive in purchasing that land. So, there is a great story that we can see in what's happened to the neighbouring area and what you're proposing and the strategic value of that. So 50 years on, we all get to benefit from what the council did in the 1970s with Pepper's Paddock. So my question, sorry, I've gone a bit blank here. I did have a question for you.
We can
we'll
come
call
back
this
to you.
chemo brain, sorry.
We can come back to you,
me.
contestant number 3. Are there any other? Yeah, thank you. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Payne. Should council purchase this land and we're able to, all of those kind of things, what would you like to see on the land? Is it just revegetated? I know you've talked about biodiversity and different things. Could you explain what your vision is?
Well, when we talk about it, we're looking at basically very much the environment bit, and I'll come back to a bit out of what the officers say about that. But with Pepper's Paddock, we're saying how great it looks. It was a lot of community effort. Friends of Watery Gully, 29 years, Sunday morning once a month for 29 years. But that sort of thing is possible, and it has been in Wattle Glen. And in fact, the Residents Association paid for over half of the shelter that's built there. We built the first playground, literally built it, paid for it and built it. It's now been replaced by a council one. But that sort of endeavour is there to make it happen. And what it is would be very much would be if council bought it, they decide. But the suggestions we have looked at is things like you've got down the Watery Gully is where the council's Green Wedge Regional Trail is, and we're looking at this land could be used to provide a link so that regional trail, which by the way is it's a non-sealed one in the main, but it goes. Council has provided it all the way up to the beginning of the Kinglake National Park. Now, what council hasn't done is the last kilometre coming into Wattle Glen, and if we can find a way of doing it, we can use this land to then go over to Wilson's Road where the Diamond Creek Regional Trail is. And then you have a trail that goes from the CBD in Melbourne all the way up to, top of the Kinglake Ranges. So that's a possibility. There's other things that council might be looking for, like most other places in Nillumbik, a dog, park, fenced off one, keep the dogs off the Wattle Glen Oval, which is the main thing that happens there these days, is the dogs. But it would be a council decision if that's where they wanted the dog park, or would they rather have it down underneath the power lines or something like that. But it certainly would be available for that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Any other councillors with any other questions? Councillor Duffy, you have the question good to go.
Thank you, Bill. I'm a bit back on track now. It was about the use of the land. So at the moment, like in your submission, you talked about biodiversity, and earlier on you talked about the state government looking towards making biodiversity a priority. Council, we have a biodiversity plan that we are looking at, a strategy that we're looking to make good on in the next part of this council term as well. So looking at the land that you're proposing, that council buys, and the use of the land, we've got a good example of something that's happened recently at Grey Sharps Road, and we'll be talking about that later tonight, where council purchased land and then has since gone on and created a community park with that. And in the notes for the agenda, you'll notice that council has put in, on top of the purchase price for Grey Sharps Road at Hurstbridge, we've committed an extra $920,000, and the state government have also committed $2 million. So,
Councillor?
Yeah, my question is, there's quite a lot going on at Grey Sharps Road in terms of land that council's purchased. Would you be wanting the same sort of thing happening on the land here at Wattle Glen, or would you be looking at it to stay pretty much in its natural state, rather than becoming a park that's got cricket nets and all sorts of other recreational activities that are happening with it?
Well, I think a better model for what Wattle Glen could be would be the reserves up at Panton Hill,
yeah,
which were a deal was done, but they do have some horse riding, but they essentially are there for protection for biodiversity and for environment. But also, I think, yes, actually I scribbled on one of my excellent bits of paper, I did notice that on the council website for the budget, for this budget, there's a statement that council has acknowledged the multiple threats facing all communities and ecosystems as a result of climate change. Blah, blah, blah. And this proposal that we've come to the budget, the same budget, about is very much that, looking at maintaining this land, improving the biodiversity and not waiting for someone to do something that, and then the officers have to, send them off the magistrate's court or something for chopping down trees. This is a let's go and improve things because we want to, not because we have to.
Thank you, Bill. If there are no further questions, I will thank you very much, and I will ask Anika Van Holsen to make her way to the microphone.
Thank you, councillors. I support the Wattle Glen Residents Association's proposal for the public acquisition of rural zoned land at 36 Manage Road in Wattle Glen for community use, and the association's request for a small amount of funding to get the proposal objectively assessed, its pros, cons, and potentials. I believe there exists a very strong case. This land can do important things. It can provide a safe and strategic link in the Shire's trails network. It can become a haven for local wildlife and provide a strategic habitat corridor between the Greenwich to its northeast and the waterway to its south. It can provide a dog park, recreational opportunities. It can improve connections for residents to the Pepper's Paddock open space, the school, tennis court, shop, public transport. It can take effective action on climate change. COVID has shown that open space and trails can be lifesavers. This proposal ticks all the council boxes for health and well-being, social connection, inclusion, connectivity, character and identity, environment, biodiversity, climate change, strong leadership, and a raft of other council policy. It is completely consistent with Nillumbik's strategic objective of protecting the green wedge and biodiversity. Bottom line, here is a small community trying to do something important. Please do not be guided by misinformation or inadequate information or be solely focused on the costs. Please, like a proper cost and benefit analysis, let the proposal be objectively appraised and make informed decisions based on facts. Thank you.
Thank you. Anika, are there any questions for the submitter? Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. Anika, I've got a question related to your time on council, and I don't have all of the information of what's come in the past, but I'm wondering, were you involved in the council that made the decision to purchase the Grey Sharps Road precinct?
Yes.
So we can say thank you
well,
for that.
Insofar, that issue started during my term of council, and it was actually, at that time, temporary acquisition because council was, it became available through the education department, was looking at its land and was putting it up for private sale. So I suggested that council takes control of the land, temporarily buys it, and proposed, and at the time we proposed a development controlled by council rather than by private enterprise. It was controlled by council, so you could decide what was going to happen to that
I'm
land.
sorry to interrupt, but we are looking to Manish Road, yeah?
Yes, so my question kind of relates to, were you involved in that? So it is relevant because it shows that there was council foresight to buy land that became available to do good for the council in the future. So
Is it a question or a statement? Are you making a point about Grey Sharps Road?
no, I'm just, are you trying to tie me
Not
here?
at all. I'm just trying to work out the connection to the Manish
Well,
Road
I was
property.
asking the question, was Anika involved in that decision? And she said yes. So
Yes,
I'm
I'm trying to work
satisfied
out the
with
connection
that.
between that decision and the one before us tonight.
Well, the decision is that, you know, at the time there was a council who saw an opportunity to buy land that was available for sale publicly and took advantage of that sale so that council was in control of what happened on that land rather than
I think
the
that's
public.
a point. I think
That's
you're making
right.
a
So
point.
you asked me, why did I ask the question and what's the relevance?
But you didn't really ask the question. It's to
I
do with a
did ask
different...
the question. Councillor Payne, you're being really difficult at the moment. I know that you're chairing the meeting,
I'm asking
but
for
simply
clarity,
I
that's
asked a
all.
question
Okay.
that I believe has relevance, and Anika gave me a very satisfactory answer to show that when she was on council, as I am on council now, as to why she made the decision that she did at that time, and now we are in a position where we can see the benefit of that decision. So it was a relevant question, and it could have been finalised without this tit for tat if you just let me ask the question, so I could
I think
say
we've
thank
asked,
you.
and I think we've heard the answer. Thank you. Are there any other questions of Anika? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, we have our final speaker, which is Henry Haslam.
Thank you, councillors. I'm appearing here on my own behalf and also on behalf of Friends of Nillumbik. To start with, on behalf of Friends of Nillumbik, I want to acknowledge the positive response from council, and I suppose that means specifically Vince Lombardi and his team, to our suggestion last year about the presentation of the fees and charges schedule of the budget. It's nice to get a good result. The additional information now provided improves consultation with the community and transparency about council's activities, which both contribute to good governance. While acknowledging the improvements already made, we offer two further comments. We repeat our suggestion that it would be helpful to include at the beginning of the fees and charges schedule some brief comment explaining how the various items are determined, including an explanation of the MFU concept, its interaction with the government's annual inflation number, and links to relevant sources. Secondly, we note that there remains what appears to me and to us to be an apparent inconsistency in the information in that schedule, in that some fees are still specified as monetary fee units, while others are shown as a dollar amount plus CPI, when the calculations, as far as I've been able to determine with my own analysis, effectively come to the same thing. So we recognise in putting that comment out there that there may be technical reasons for the difference. On user charges, turning now to user charges, the consensus from a community panel which I attended in 2015 was that, amongst other things, council moved towards a more user-pays way of maintaining services without without the pressures on the budget. We recognise that the enduring legacy of the 2017-20 council rate decisions and the fair rates cap of 1.75% for 22-23 put constraints on council's finances. So an increase in the council's discretionary fees is quite understandable. But the increase of 9% seems a little bit high, and I'm particularly jumping out at me the 50% increase in childcare costs or childcare fees. That increase could well put significant pressure on family budgets in a time of flatlining wages and rising inflation. So some justification of the 50% increase, I think, would be justified. finally, on the budget process, we repeat our concerns that the current budget process does not provide effective opportunity for community input. Oh my God, I'm going to finish here. On budget directions and inclusions. Essentially, what we're doing here at the moment, partly because the only change between the draft budget and the final budget is that the word draft is crossed off the heading and nothing else happens. So that makes this something of a sham consultation. And the problem is that anything that's brought up, like the Wattle Glen people here are talking about the $5,000 or whatever it comes to.
Thanks, Henry.
It takes at least a year before anything can get done. We have some suggestions for how to fix that.
Thank you, Henry. Are there any questions for the submitter from councillors? Mayor Eyre.
What are some of those suggestions that you're referring to?
Well, thank you. The simple thing is to start the process of asking the community to put submissions in for expenditure or capital items much earlier in the process. And we're suggesting here sometime in December with a deadline for those submissions by the 7th of February. The 7th is simply the first 7 days of the month of February. We know that in February both the councillors and council officers are well into the budget process and putting in suggestions from the various people for capital spending at that stage can feed directly into the process that's going on without causing any kerfuffle. We appreciate, well, I certainly appreciate that the budget's a big document, it's all interlinked, and the time between today and when it has to be finalised is really not enough to go rejigging the whole process. So that if you could get some parts of the suggestions dealt with earlier as part of the standard process, then hopefully you get a bit more community interaction and response and feedback and so forth and consultation occurring than we get now. At the moment, whatever suggestions for capital spending is going to have to wait at least a year. I looked at two of the suggestions. One is from Carol Bonney and the other one is from Sandra Rogue, if I pronounce her name correctly, madam. Effectively tell the submitters, too late now, we'll think about it later. Well, you know, maybe we could do better than that. So have a second process. Don't cut this one out, but start part of it earlier.
Henry, can we have a response from the CEO, please?
Yeah.
Through the chair, thank you, Henry, for your presentation. The point you make about major capital expenditure, of course, would be right. It would be too difficult to do that. A number of the items that have been brought up tonight are such that council can consider those and rejig the overall budget. If you're talking about the first presenter, he was talking about 30,000, 40,000, 5,000 for Wattle Glen. These are amounts of money that, having commended the CFO, he can move around to some degree, and this isn't something that would need to wait for a year, and it's not a sham exercise. The council will consider this, having heard it tonight. Very good cases have been made. They may decide not to, but they'll certainly consider it, and if they do want us to find a way to get it in, that we'll do that. Take your point though about starting earlier on bigger things, but also it is true that you know the ward councillor, you know the councillor as well. You're quite a regular attender, and you're welcome at any time ever to suggest something. It doesn't need to necessarily, it can feed into the formal process right now for next year and in future, but appreciate you coming here and your comments, but certainly what is being discussed with submitters and the council tonight is definitely not off the table for 12 months, but it is up to the council what they do with it.
Well, thank you for that, but can I just respond that if you read the officers' responses to both the Bonnie and the Rogue submissions, that the responses effectively say, we'll put this into the cycle for next time. So essentially it's being deferred for a year. So, and that's happened in the past. So that's what I'm trying to get around.
Noted, and through the chair again, sorry chair, that's something that we'll have to remedy at this point in time, because these aren't amounts of money that we couldn't do something about. So thank you, Henry.
Are there any other questions of the submitter from any other councillors? Councillor Duffy.
I've got two questions. The first one, Henry, is are there any other suggestions that you have?
No. Look, the only other question I have is I know all of us, I'm sure, have heard about the 0.25 percentage points increase in the interest rates by the Reserve Bank, and if you read the news, the story is that by the end of the year it'll be up to 1% increase, or up to that level. So the question, not a
Point of order.
Yeah.
Just a point of order to the chair. You know, this consultation is designed for councillors to ask you questions. That's the process outlined in local law. I don't believe it's appropriate for submitters to ask questions of council. I think, you know, we've been very, very lenient tonight, and I think
Can I rephrase the comment?
There are other submitters that are waiting to speak tonight. We've effectively had 3 submitters and we're an hour in. So I'd like the chair to try to stick it to local law.
Absolutely. Henry, do you have an answer to the question? I think it was a no.
The answer to the question is I'm concerned, and the point I want to make is I'm concerned that maybe the budget doesn't reflect the future interest rate increases that we're likely to see, which would have an impact on the ability of the council to drive down the outstanding debt. That's it.
Okay. Any other questions?
The second question that I had, Henry, I'm really sorry, I'm struggling tonight with getting these things out. You mentioned the community and
this happens to me all the time.
I'm sorry. You mentioned the community and wanting to give the community adequate time to put forward suggestions to council, so
Yes.
they were there was realistic time frame and the community were engaged, so it's not a sham. And I take Carl's point in this not being a sham. It's an exercise that we want to do thoroughly and properly. Would you like to see council have a time where we do community engagement that is very broad, not for putting together a council plan like we did last year, but just saying exactly what you said before about what projects would you like to see, what capital improvements would you like to see? Because, you know, we've got a budget that we have to manage where no one's going to say we want $6 million worth of drainage done. They don't see that part of the council works that are really important that we need to do, but it is like the parks, the trails, the other things like that. Do you think that that's something that's missing, that we need to have just a general, we're trying to get our heads around what we want to do for the next 12 months. If you've got a pet project, please let us know and we can record them and have a register, and then we can look at prioritising them. Is that something that you'd like to see? I'm just flashing out what you said before about, and how do we capture that that suggestion that you made about the community being able to have adequate time to put forward their ideas rather than people coming to ward councillors with little ideas.
I think that would be a great idea. You wouldn't have to do it every year, but I think that would be a great idea, Councillor.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Henry. And at that point, I will ask, do we have a mover for the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Ramtaran.
Thank you, Councillor Payne, and that's definitely all the speakers this time.
I believe so. For this
Just going to turn that off because we're getting some echo. Testing. Oh, that's better. I'd like to move that the committee, acting under delegation from council, 1, receives and notes the submissions received in respect of the draft budget 22 to 23 in accordance with section 96 of the Local Government Act 2020. 2, considers the matters contained in the submissions and the committee's report during finalisation of the 2022-2023 budget. 3, requests a further report to be presented at the 24 May 2022 council meeting, recommending the adoption of the 2022 to 2023 budget. And 4, acknowledges and thanks, maybe if we could add that in, acknowledges and thanks presentations to the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Ramtaran. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Mayor Eyre. Councillor Ramtaran, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you. Look, I think something we're all really passionate about and something that the community certainly wants to see from council is good financial management. And I really see that in this budget. We do have to make some difficult decisions as a council. We don't have all the money in the world, which is disappointing, I think, for us and for the community, especially when you first come in here and have all these grand ideas and have to really moderate them in order to make everything fit within a very stretched budget. But that is the future. That is the reality of local government and rate capping. One of the difficult decisions we did need to make with this budget was to increase the waste management charge, and that is because we do need to rehabilitate the Kangaroo Ground tip. But to look at the positives of that, in the future, down the track, not too far away, we will have a rehabilitated tip, which can be turned into a community reserve for Kangaroo Ground. And I really look forward to hearing from the community what they want to see there on that site once it's been rehabilitated. So that's actually a real positive and something really exciting that's coming out of this budget down the track. In terms of some of the feedback that we've had from the community today, I think it's all worth considering, and I'm sure we'll get a briefing on this and we'll have chance to actually talk it through. I think crisis support is a very important topic, and our speaker on that is not here at the moment, but certainly something council should consider in terms of how do we support that, and is it a financial contribution or something else? In terms of looking at acquiring new land, I think a $4,000 or $5,000 spend is a reasonable ask, but you've also got to bear in mind that officers have said it's probably more like 40 to 50,000. So to do what's being suggested. So again, it comes to making the difficult decisions and figuring out what we're able to do and where we can best spend our money. And to mention the suggestion from Henry about actually going out to the community earlier to get suggestions about what could go in the budget. I think that's a really good idea, but it's also something we'll have to be quite careful about how we do it. We did actually do that during the Our People, Our Place, Our Future survey at the beginning of this council term. We asked people, how do you want council's money to be spent? Where do you want the money to go? And the response was overwhelmingly more sports grounds and upgrades to our stadiums, and no money spent on governance. So it's not entirely realistic, and I think if we were to do that, we would need to really set the scope of what we're actually asking the community to provide feedback on. It's the sort of thing that any particular community group could easily hijack and get hundreds of people to make a submission to ask for money for a particular project. But as the council, we're the ones who need to make the difficult decisions and weigh up the pros and cons and prioritise and actually decide where that money is best spent. So that's what makes community consultation challenging in advance of putting the budget together, but certainly something that we could consider how we might make that work. So thank you to all the submitters. Just talking about some of the major initiatives in this budget which we are funding, and which I'm really pleased that we're proposing to fund if this budget is endorsed at the 24th of May council meeting. So there's funding in there to review our biodiversity strategy, which is a really important thing for us to do as the Green Wedge Shire, and I'm really pleased that there's a significant allocation for that. There's funding to investigate measures to establish and enhance an urban tree canopy within our urban areas. Again, something that I'm really pleased to say we're doing as the Green Wedge Shire. We've got money for our neighbourhood character strategy, which again is protecting what we love about where we live, making sure that neighbourhood character is properly protected through our planning scheme. We've got an allocation in there to finish the Wattle Glen Public Realm Framework, which is some really good work that council's been doing and will continue to do. An integrated transport strategy, which will help to guide planning, sustainable outcomes and advocacy in terms of transport and how people get around the Shire. So there are some really good things in there. We are putting ratepayers' money to good use, and I think we've really been able to prioritise and pick the projects that are going to have the best outcome for the community. So I'm really pleased with what we've got there in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Amtaran. Mayor Eyre, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Payne. I support basically what Councillor Amtaran is saying. And the difficult part is that if we were to bring something new into the budget, what do we cut out? And that is quite tricky as well. So whilst it might seem okay to put in 5,000 or 10,000 or 20,000 into the budget, but what do we then cut out? And that's a tricky thing as well. But I thank you all for coming in tonight and to all the submitters to this as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Eyre. Are there any councillors hoping to speak? Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. I would like to thank the submitters again. I suppose as a council, we're here to look after people. People live in Nillumbik, animals live in Nillumbik, we have wildlife and trees, etc. I'm just, after listening to this tonight, the discussion, I'm just looking at what's our legacy. What do we want our legacy to be as a council? I know that there are lots of things that frustrate me and other people in the community, and yeah, I'm really assessing where we spend our money, and as a council it's looking at, are we putting our money in the best spots to be able to give us the best impact for the community and the generations to come. So I'm going to seriously consider what's been discussed tonight, look through the budget again, and try and ensure that we're making the best decisions. So there are some areas that we do have service level agreements to do things like, do we need to cut the grass as frequently as we do? If that's going to save us some money to be able to help feed people that are homeless. Do we need to paint buildings as frequently as we do? If that money is going to be able to be put to a better use. So yeah, it's really looking at how are people affected in the way that we spend our money. So thank you to the submitters for the points that you've raised in how we handle what we do today as daily business as a council, and what we can leave as a legacy in the future, looking 50 years into the future. What will councillors be saying thank you to us for in terms of the decisions that we're making in this term?
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Any other councillors hoping to speak to the motion? Yes, Councillor Perkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just thank you, submitters, those that have come along tonight. Look, I get to the point fairly quickly. I'm not one for leading people on to think there's some chance of some miracle when it's not going to happen. Council's not going to buy this land. What council will consider for 36 Manish Road is, and that would never be a late end misère, if the owner, John Geddes, was prepared to donate it to council, then council would have to consider, well, what's the cost associated with managing that land into the future? It's not just the purchase costs that I'm concerned about, it's the ongoing costs. We know how tight the budget is, certainly officers and all councillors know how tight the budget is. To suggest that council somehow are going to find some millions of dollars to purchase 36 Manish Road, it's an absolute nonsense in my mind. I've been on council 12 years. When we've ever got land, it's for a strategic purpose, and I haven't seen many parcels of land purchased, to be honest. The one at Grey Sharps Road was supposed to be cost neutral, as we know, it ended up costing many millions of dollars. Other lands that I've seen come into council ownership have basically been donated by the state government. Fabro Field was an example where, again, it was a consideration, do we take on this land? It's generally the state government department that don't want to or can't afford to manage land anymore. They try to hand it off to council, and we consider whether or not we want to take on the management of that land. It's not a done deal to sort of think, oh, here's some free land, this is a great outcome for the community, because community essentially has to pay rates, and we are trying to keep the rates down as best we can. So I note the officer response to some of the submissions were the three of the submissions. We note the request by Wattle Glen Residents Association for council accommodate an objective assessment of the value to council in purchasing the Rural Conservation Zone land, approximately 11 hectares between Manish Road and Clark Avenue. Initial assessment by a qualified consultant is estimated around $40,000 to $50,000 to undertake the required work. The request will be referred to future annual budget cycles. You know, 40 to 50 grand they're talking about, but I honestly can't justify $5,000. You know, the land's in private ownership. It's ultimately where a house will be built and be managed by that landowner as it is now. If the owner wants to gift it to council, he's the one person we need here tonight to convince me that it's worth investing that $40,000 or $50,000, because that's probably what we have to spend to work out whether or not we'd like to take the generous gift from Mr. Geddes. But I don't think that offer's on the table. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think council spending any more time on this notion is warranted. But happy to endorse the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Well, at that stage, I will now put this motion to the vote. All in favour? And that motion is carried unanimously. The next report tonight is PCC 018/22 BMX and Off-Road Biking Facility Community Consultation Report. We have 4 speakers listed. Actually, we have 3 listed. And the first is Matt Smith. If you could make your way to the microphone.
Hi everyone, my name's Matt. I've just come along tonight to talk about the BMX trails that are going to be constructed in the near future. Firstly, I'll say I first started riding at the Dymo trails as they were known in 1997 as a 15-year-old, and it continued to do so as a form of fun and fitness up until they were demolished last November. And basically the 2 topics I really wanted to talk about was firstly the level of the degree of ability for the new trails to be built, and secondly the location. So yeah, the first point, the new trails, I'd like to see the majority of the jumps built to a more intermediate to advanced level of riding, but also having a section accommodated for children and novices also. You want to, cover everyone there. But the Dymo trails, they were known for more of an intermediate to advanced riding ability, and often on a weekend you would meet people that would travel from around metropolitan Melbourne, statewide, interstate, and occasionally if someone was holidaying from overseas, they'd heard about the trails and would come down to the area to ride and have a fun day out riding. So I think with the new trails being constructed, it really needs to be important to make it to a degree of level to really put Diamond Creek back on the map. As like, for example, people go to Torquay to surf at Bells Beach. You want to make Dymo renowned for having some of the best bike jumps within the state and hopefully the country once again. So that's the first point I wanted to get across. And secondly, also the location. I know a lot of people are wanting the original location to be approved again, and VicTrack or whoever manages the land to be contacted to see if the land could be leased, or as Councillor Perkins was saying before, the state government has donated land on occasions. Like, it can't hurt to ask, even if it's a long shot, but because it is very important when it comes to trails to have the right, like shade from trees can be a good element in maintaining the jumps, and also just being sun smart within yourself. You don't want to be out in the sun during a hot summer's day or whatnot riding on jumps. But yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about tonight. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Are any councillors with a question for the submitter? Mayor Eyre.
Yeah, so you're talking about the ability being intermediate to advanced. So I'm assuming you're saying that most of the area would be set aside for that, with a small area for beginners.
Yeah.
So how long do you reckon it take? I suppose it depends. That's not a question really. I'm asking how long does it take to get to an advance, but I guess it depends on how much you put in. So
yeah, and naturally, a lot of teenagers, if they start riding early, within 3 or 4 years, they can get pretty good. Like, as you see, BMX is now in the Olympics, and also freestyle BMX. So it's something that should be looked into a bit more serious than just like the whole BMX bandit sort of terminology. But
okay, yeah, thanks.
Any other councillors? Councillor Perkins.
Matt, some of the submissions that I read, like I'd imagine you'd probably try to cater for all levels, but then some of the submissions were saying it's probably more appropriate to keep intermediate advanced separate from pump tracks and stuff for smaller kids. Like, I think everyone has to be accommodated for, but would you think it needs to happen on the same site, or we could put pump tracks and that sort of other infrastructure elsewhere?
Well, it really depends on how big the area of land you're being approved to build on. Like, if it was the original area, there was enough land within sections of the original trail site. You could have a small, beginner level out one side and more advanced on the other. But yeah, once again, it just comes down to the size of the land allocated. Because obviously some people would like to come along with their children. They might be more advanced riders, and they might have their young children with them for the day that want to also ride and have a bit of fun, more of a family orientated area. No worries.
Okay. Another question, yes, from Anne?
Yeah, you talked about the size of the land. The proposed land, which is obviously still up for discussion, but 145 Allendale Road, is that similar size, would you say, to what you had, or is it different because it's fairly sparse? Like, obviously we could put trees in, so can you talk about the differences?
I've actually had a look at the Allendale Road area. There's the first section just as you come up before, and then it gets wider out the back. I mean, ultimately that would be, more than enough to build suitable trails on with the land area, but due to it being in the open elements, it is going to deteriorate rapidly with the sun, and it's just the way it is with actual dirt jumps. If it was all made of concrete like a skate park, okay, it's unaffected, but being actual dirt jumps, they tend to more crumble under weather conditions.
One more quick, yes.
That's probably a bit of a Dorothy Dixon, Matt, but you aware of are you aware of councils and community generally the need to protect remnant bushland, particularly within urban areas, and that if you were applying for a planning permit to do such a thing, there'd be tree protection zones and you wouldn't be able to build anything sort of near the tree. That's what that's all about. So, can you understand the difficulty of officially trying to build something to replicate what was on the current site just because of the environment that's there? Can you understand the bind that council's in?
I can understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, if you went down there now, the amount of you wouldn't have to clear any vegetation that's already, previously wasn't there. So,
but just the disturbance to the soil. Like if you're trying to build a house, there might be a tree protection zone that covers the whole area of the vegetation of the tree that you sort of can't build on or disturb the earth.
Yeah.
So that was incredibly disturbed earth in what was there. I'm not saying it's fantastic now, but I would imagine would be very, very difficult to do that, to legally build what was there.
Yeah, I'm unaware of exact what legislations and laws are in place in regards to that sort of stuff, but just from if someone wasn't aware of what laws were in place, you would actually look at the area and you'd probably think if some dirt was brought in or whatnot, you wouldn't have to actually disturb any, tree roots or whatnot with the amount of, cleared land there at the moment anyhow. So.
Yep, thank you.
Any other councillors? Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Matt. I've got two questions. But firstly, I'm also trying to work out, I'm terrible at guessing ages.
Yeah.
So you said that you first started jumping there when you were using the track, when you were 15?
15, yeah.
Do you mind letting me know how many years that's been that you've been using the area?
25, I'm 40 now.
You're 40 now, wow. I wouldn't have picked you as 40, so I'm very bad at picking ages though, so that's amazing. 25 years, thank you for sharing that with me. So you've got a lot of experience in this and I'm grateful that you've come to talk to us tonight. So I'm picking up, my first question is, you've asked, could council ask VicTrack if the land is something that's, there's an option for council to take over the land. So that's a definite that's something that you would like us to do, yes? Yeah. And with that, the second part to that question is, your preference is to see the jumps return to the location that they were?
Yeah,
Is that
and
what I'm hearing from you?
the majority of the riders in the area also want that. So, especially like the younger generations, like just to like, you know, the tree coverage and the surroundings and.
So if we were to put the jumps on the proposed block of land at Allendale Road that doesn't have all of the tree canopy right close in, would you be happy for us to plant that out so that over time it did become a very treed area?
That'd be great. Like, I don't know, I won't be riding obviously by the time the trees
that
have
will
grown.
take quite a
That's
time for
obviously-
those trees to grow.
I sort of want to like have a bit of fun for the next half a dozen years or whatnot, and before I'm no longer, you know, sending myself over jumps or whatnot. 'Cause
You're a
you can't do
veteran.
this- You can't do this forever, so.
The other thing that we've talked to community about is what do you want the jumps to look like and what extra facilities would you like to have? We've had feedback from people saying toilets, seating, all sorts of things. How important is that to you, that there are extra elements to make the space usable and, you know, hygienic as well, like with water, toilets? Is that something that you'd like to see wherever we put the jumps, reinstate them?
Yeah, of course it'd be a bonus, but ultimately the jumps would come first. Like, once again, like, you know, I didn't live too far from the original Diamond Creek Trail, so I'd often just, you know, have lunch or whatnot before I had to go. But yeah, I mean, one important thing you'd need there is shade at least, because you can't be sitting in the sun all day and getting sunstroke or whatnot. But yeah, like, yeah, seating, of course, that's good, and it would all help in the long run, yeah, definitely.
Great, thank you, Matt.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Matt.
No worries.
Thank you. We have other speakers. We have Travis Lynch.
Hey, how's it going? First, I'd like to say thank you for having me share here today. My name's Travis Lynch and I've lived in the Diamond Valley for 33 years. I'd first like to discuss the location of the proposed mountain bike BMX facility. It's in my opinion and other riders that I've spoken to that Allendale Road, Eltham is the preferred site for the following reasons. The site's an open location which decreases the likelihood of antisocial behaviour. The location has easy access for emergency services if needed. The location doesn't impose on train lines or creek beds. When compared with other proposed location, Allendale Road has a decreased risk of children without spatial awareness playing in the jumping area while people are riding. In relation to design, there needs to be opportunity for progression of riders' skills. For example, a pump track, a track that's designed for endless laps with multiple options. This track's made for all ages and all ability levels. A beginner line consisting of mallow berms, small rollers and dirt tabletops. An intermediate line, this is a more technical line with wood ramps, jumps, berms and dirt jumps. An advanced line, this line is for experienced riders comfortable with leaving the ground and has wood ramps and dirt jumps that are not connected to the landings where only experienced riders can ride it. The design will need to include a starting roll in to ensure safe speed can be achieved for each line. If the design could include unique features for riders such as wall rides, whales, tails, hips, which connect different lines together, which will give riders different options and experiences. For ideas, I'd like to reference the following bike parks from around the globe: Sapwe Bike Park, California, America; George Road Bike Park, Queenstown, New Zealand; City Dirt Bike Park, South Australia; Woburn Bike Park, United Kingdom. I've brought with me some photos of these locations if you'd like to have a look at them. Water availability and toilets are necessary to allow for the community to maintenance and hygiene the track, which aids in lowering risk of injury and encourages a community sense of pride and responsibility of the location. Maintenance crews should be established in some way where the community can choose to become caretakers of the location. In rounding out what I've said, I'd like to express a degree of urgency in pushing this matter through the necessary council requirements to get the park established. My reasons for expressing the need for such pace is that riders of this area have had multiple significant riding locations for various reasons in the past 6 to 12 months. taken away from us. This occurring during a period of significant loss experienced by Victorians through COVID-19, where the only option for exercise was within your local area. The community has felt that the councillors removed their hobby without consideration for where riders are to go in the time it will take to establish this park. I hope that these points can be taken into consideration with regards to council's proposed time frame. Thanks for
Travis.
giving me
Perfect
the time.
timing. Thank you so much. All right, questions? Yes, Councillor Perkins.
Thanks for that submission, Travis. Probably my first question is, you're aware we've got $650,000 in the current budget, or the draft budget that we adopted hopefully next week, which is a significant sum. There's also other add-ons that people talk about, like lights and toilets and barbecue shelters and all the rest of it. What percentage of that $650,000 would you like to see spent on the actual jumps?
All of it.
Yep.
It's all of it. Yep. When you do things like landscaping and stuff like that, you're taking away a massive proportion of the money, when I think you'd rather have more features for people to ride. Yeah.
So that other stuff could be done later.
Yeah, absolutely.
In following budgets over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions for Travis? Yes. Councillor Duffy?
Thank you. Thanks, Travis, for that presentation. It was really thorough. I get the sense of urgency as well, and I really like the comments about building a place that has community pride and community caretaking.
Yep.
You mentioned that you mentioned a number of BMX parks from around the world and photos, and I'm wondering, would you be able to share those with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
If not tonight, but by email or some way, so that we can all see them and know what you're referring to?
Yep.
That'd be
absolutely.
great. Thank you.
Yep.
And the last question was, I'm picking up from you that you're quite happy with the location of 145 Allendale Road as the proposed location as where we would go ahead and rebuild.
As Peter said, I completely understand tree protection zones and everything like that. Like, I'm a chippy, so I understand all that when you're building houses. And as I said, with the points that I made, like, it's an open location, which decreases the likelihood of antisocial behaviour. And then the emergency services, it's not near train lines or creek beds, so it's not going to interfere with metro trains, which is obviously a big thing that happened at Diamond Creek. Not only that, I've heard that there was another location which was behind the new playground in Diamond Creek, the mining playground there. I just think if it's near that, little kids will wander from the park to go and have a look at that. You want to encourage kids to come with their bikes, and that's it. You don't want kids walking over just to walk on the jumps and play on the jumps. So if it's sort of separated from that, well, that sort of eliminates that.
And Travis, the last part of the question here is, with the community pride and the caretaking, you've just mentioned that you're a chippy, and we've got $650,000 in the budget, as Councillor Perkins mentioned. Would you see part of the attraction of this project being the community input in helping to build it? Like, council was going out to a contractor, that's the way we do things, but for this project, do you think that that's one of the ways that we should look to approach the rebuild, in having community and people with skills like yours involved in?
Yeah, absolutely. If it works
community
like
tasks?
that, but you know what I mean? I'm not sure if obviously there needs to be planning so everything can be built to specs and stuff like that. But yeah, if that's the way that we can do it, then that's awesome. If the community can get involved by actually building it, I think that will create like a major thing where people will want to utilise it more and maintain it themselves, because you're obviously taking pride in building something, which is half of the thing. You want to build your jumps, and then you want to ride them yourself. So it's not just rocking up and riding at a place. It's actually, the passion is building the jumps as well. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Travis. Any other? Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. It might seem like a really silly question, because I'm not an expert in BMXing, but I'm wondering, could you use a mountain bike on these jumps?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I ride, a mountain bike.
Okay.
So,
So it's broader than BMX?
It's not just BMXs.
Okay, so I could have a go as well then, because I've got a mountain
absolutely.
bike.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ramtran.
Yeah, just quickly, just to address a question that was asked before by Councillor Perkins, how much of the money would you want spent on jumps out of the 650 that we're probably going to be spending on this?
Yep.
If you also said you want that a toilet is important and facilities like
toilets
water.
are important, obviously.
So that's about 300k.
I know, there's 300,000, exactly.
Would you say that's enough of a priority to take away about half of the budget? No.
I'd rather see I'd like it all built on dirt jumps. Like that would be perfect. You know what I mean? But obviously, I think you'll have to have toilet facilities there as well, and running water is a major thing too for maintenance of the jumps. So, and a drinking fountain as well for kids.
Yeah, thanks. So it sounds like it won't be all of it spent on jumps, unfortunately. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Travis. We do have Councillor Perkins.
I was just, in line, I think it might have been Natalie's question, but just in terms of the management of the facility into the future, would you think, and I'm thinking the way that, we lease sports grounds to cricket clubs or footy clubs or tennis clubs, kindergartens to committees of management, could you see a model where there's a committee of management that helps to actively manage, the facility over time?
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, I go riding at Park Orchards all the time. I take my son there. Because it's a well-maintained private BMX track, you know what I mean? So something like that would be awesome. If we could hold events there and stuff like that. But if you want to hold events there, it has to be like a really good facility.
Because otherwise, I think, and I'm just sort of thinking of the ongoing cost to council as well. If council does the total maintenance, it'll never be what you guys expect. It's guys who are not trained in building or repairing jumps.
That's why I think it's really important to have a crew that is, the community that looks after the place.
All right, we'll certainly have more discussions around that, because I think that's a good way going forward, because we've got to think beyond the actual $650,000.
As you said before, you know what I mean? Like it costs heaps of money to maintain things.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Thanks, Councillor. We do have another speaker to speak to this, and that's
can I just
Jay?
ask one quick question for Travis? We heard from Matt that he's been using the Dymo jumps for 25 years.
Yeah.
How many years have you been using them for?
Probably 15 years, something like that. Yep.
Great, thanks.
great.
Cool.
Thank you so much. Jay Lovelace. Jay Lovelace is not in the house. That is the end of the speakers. So, on that basis, do I have a mover for the recommendation? Yes. Councillor Perkins.
Thanks. I'll move the recommendation as per the papers.
Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to do that.
Councillor Duffy. Councillor Perkins, would you like to speak?
Yeah, look, thank you. Just to talk about some of the consultation that we've seen, thanks very much, especially to Matt and Travis. That's been very helpful, what you've said. And through a lot of the feedback, it has been about that intermediate, advanced jumps that are required. I think Travis wants most of the money spent on the jumps themselves, which I think aligns with everything else I've been hearing. The notion of putting it near the tram, I haven't been supportive of the tram location myself, mainly because I can see that issue with the smaller kids, coming to the bike jumps. It's much like the regional playground was built for all ages, all abilities. The parkour area was supposed to be for adults. So people, jumping over these big logs, it's quite a dangerous area, and you have to be quite skilled. But, the older teens and adults can't get near that because it's become a climbing area for younger kids. So what looks very good on paper ultimately doesn't end up that way. We have parents actually lifting their kids up to this parkour stuff. That flying fox was supposed to be designed for adults, and we have adults who lift their kids up, so the kids are... there's quite a height that they could drop from. But in terms of the submissions and the surveys, basically we've seen two streams. First from Participate Nillumbik, 240 contributions. 93% of those people supported Allendale Road as the preferred location. 231 people out of 238. In order of what people wanted. Most bike jumps was number 1, pump track number 2, and shade and shelter was third on the list of priorities. 42% would be involved in a working group if that was set up in the future, and I tend to think that could lead into a committee of management or ongoing management and maintenance of the facility, and that actually facility be leased to that committee of management, like we do for other sporting endeavours. You know, BMX should be essentially no different for other sports in Nillumbik. We're just trying to formalise it a little bit, get some structure around it, and we've got those models that are already there. The largest cohort of people that contributed to the Participate in Nillumbik survey were the 40 to 44-year-olds, which is surprising. So almost a quarter of them, 22%, were in that age bracket. 69% of people were male, 31% female, so 2/3 male, 1/3 female. 45% said that they would ride their bike to the facility. So I sort of think about council expending lots of money on car park out of that 650 grand. That might not be the best bang for buck. I think what people want is the BMX facility and the jumps more so than anything else that can happen over time. Facebook was a really good way that people heard about the consultation. 77% heard about the consultation from Facebook, which is very interesting. The Trail Collective, who did a survey, was a bit more technical, but of the 235 that contributed to that survey, 80% were potential riders. 74% that said they'll ride their bike to get there. 61% support the trail style facility over the others. 41% wanted compacted dirt or earth. And that was a clear winner. 56% are currently intermediate, or 56% wanted intermediate style jumps, and 42% advanced. The priorities for add-ons were 59% wanted lights, 58% wanted toilets, and 54% wanted water fountains. So I think the surveys will really help to inform what we're going to do. I'm keen to see stuff on the ground happen as soon as possible. You know, we've got the money allocated. We need to get on with it. I'm keen to get the jumps done, to get the space utilised, to put in some basic infrastructure. You know, involve the community by all means in what the community can be involved in, whether that's tree planting. I don't think it's going to be realistic to sort of get the community to build this thing for a start. You know, certainly advice from community, but this sort of public money would have to go to a tender process, just like everything else does. But you know, involving the community into the longer term, I think would be the way to go. But you know, it's regrettable what happened. I've said it on Facebook many times. I was blindsided by the whole event with the Dymo jumps. I didn't know about it. I read about it on Facebook. You know, I popped my head up. I was mayor at the time. I got the blame. But that's what happens. It certainly wasn't initiated by council. It was a state government thing that happened, and here we are now. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Councillor Duffy, would you like to speak?
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you, Matt and Travis, for coming to speak your words and share your lived experience at the Dymo Trails. I'm aware of 3 lots of trails being removed over the last couple of years, so Eltham North and 2 of the jumps at Diamond Creek. So I think the thing that is great from this council is that there is a sense of urgency and there is money that's put aside to do something about this. I'd like to thank everyone in the community that's given their feedback, because that has been extensive. And just picking up on a comment from one of the people who put in their feedback, it was, please encourage these activities, but encourage them in the right places. And when there is a park installed, please install fauna-friendly fencing to encourage bushland edges to discourage these activities from extending into the bush. So there are really 2 sides to this. There's the protecting our biodiversity and our environment, and there's also creating a place of fun. And so we're hoping that that's what can be achieved out of this project. And there's so much feedback from the community that we have got a great wad of information to be able to help us move forward in the right way. I agree with the things that you've said, Councillor Perkins, and I'd just like to say, again, a big thank you to the community. This has been bad news, and having the jumps removed in the way that they were, and I hope that this is good news, that the community can take on board, that we're actually wanting to do something about this in a very positive way and in a quick way. And I hope that you might be able to feed that back to the community, because we are getting trashed a little bit in the community over what has happened, and it's certainly not the intention of the council to go out and deliberately, you know, make life worse for the people that live here. We're all doing this job to try and make life better for the people that live in this community. So again, thank you, Matt and Travis, for speaking on behalf of all of the users of the jumps. And one last comment from one of the people who did put in an objection, which I think we can work around this, is they'd indicated that it needs suitable parking and away from residential areas. So, you know, the proposed area at 145 Allendale Road is away from residential areas compared to other locations. And it's an area that, as Councillor Perkins indicated, probably doesn't need too much parking because it's right on the trail, so people can actually ride to it no matter what your age and stage is, whether you're young or whether you're old or whether you're bringing a family. So, yeah, just like to say congratulations again to Yelmar and his team for taking this on and giving it such a thorough workover by council officers. Maybe you said the wrong words, but you know what I mean, Yelmar. Thank you for all the work that's gone into this with the team, the consultation, and you know, the passion behind the project that the council officers have demonstrated.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Any other councillors wish to speak? Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to you both for coming in and speaking on behalf of the community, or even on behalf of yourself. And as Mayor, particularly in an election year, my role is to advocate for community. Council has an advocacy document, and in there it talks about BMX and the need to support BMX facilities in the Shire, and I will continue to do that, as I'm sure all councillors will be doing. And I'm really interested to explore the Committee of Management, because not only does that give those who are very passionate to look after the land, but it could go further to supporting beginners training and all different things like that, which, as has been talked about, would create encourages community spirit, etc. as well. And I'm really pleased to hear that it's not just BMX, it's for mountain biking as well, which I think opens it right up, because not everyone either can afford a BMX or can get on a BMX. I know I certainly wouldn't be able to now ride a BMX, but I think that opens it right up as well. So thanks for tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other councillors? Councillor Ramtran.
Yeah, I'd also like to thank you both for coming along. I think we've gained some really valuable insight from what you've had to say. And I really think this is an important thing for council to be doing. I think a couple of councillors have already said it was a really nasty shock and surprise, and we were all very blindsided when we heard that those jumps had been torn down on the Vic Track land. But that was something that was done by state government with no, as far as we're aware, no request from council for them to do that. And we've got to deal with how we move forwards and how we actually get a good outcome from the community after that happened. I don't think it's likely that we'll be able to get the jumps back where they were. I don't think it's likely that Vic Track would agree to that. But I hear your request for council to at least ask them, and we'll certainly consider what you've asked us to do tonight. I guess what I have to say on this is I'm a cyclist. I don't ride BMX. I'm not brave enough for that. But I like riding out on the roads. And if someone came along and told me I wasn't allowed to do that and started taking away bike lanes and, you know, trying to stop cyclists from being out there, I'd certainly be up in arms. And I'm sure many other cyclists would as well. So I really do feel for you when your tracks get taken down, whether it's on council land or Vic Track land or any other land. Tracks that have been there for decades, which you've grown up with, and you know, you've probably learned to ride on those tracks and taught other people to ride on them, and those tracks are now gone. And it's not fair that you struggle to find somewhere to do what you love doing, especially coming out of COVID, where we really ought to be giving people a reason to leave the house, encouraging them to get out, encouraging them to get active. It's what we really want people to do after 2 years of being stuck in lockdown. So hopefully we'll be able to get this facility up and running as soon as possible, and we'll be able to make a real difference. My ward is quite rural. I have a lot of rural land. land and a lot of residents who are far away from many facilities and amenities. And I guess the one issue with big facilities like this is you can't have them everywhere. They cost a lot of money. So I'm really keen to see how we can, once we finish this, actually extend these efforts into getting facilities in appropriate locations throughout the Shire, so that people who don't necessarily live in Eltham or Research or somewhere close enough to actually ride to this one, so that those people can still have something, even something a little bit smaller, within riding distance, and that makes it accessible to the whole Shire, and I think that's also really important. So yeah, I commend the resolution, and thank you to the submitters.
Thank you, Councillor Amtran. Any other councillors hoping to speak? In that case, I will now put this motion to a vote. All in favour? And that motion is carried unanimously. The next report tonight is PCC 019/22 Concept Plan for the implementation of the Grey Sharps Roadhurst Bridge Open Space Precinct Plan. We did have one speaker listed, but unfortunately they could not be here tonight, so I am now looking for a mover for the recommendation. Councillor Ramtran.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Payne, and I have a slightly alternate motion for this one. So I'd like to move that the committee acting under delegation from Council 1. Receives and notes submissions on the draft concept plan for Grey Sharps Roadhurst Bridge Open Space Precinct. 2. Endorses the final concept plan, Grey Sharps Road Precinct Plan in Attachment 1, subject to the following words being removed from point 15, and those words are: each would be grouped to create a visual run of single species moving from indigenous to native to exotic feature trees on the car park end. 3. Notes that vegetation is proposed to be consistent with Council's endorsed Tree Management Policy 2018, the environmental significance of the area and the site context. 4. Authorises the Director of Operations and Infrastructure to approve necessary minor amendments to the concept plan that may occur as detailed design and delivery progress as a result of site conditions, technical specifications and/or budget. 5. Requests the endorsed final concept plan, Grey Sharps Road Precinct Plan, be exhibited on Participate Nillumbik to inform the community. And 6. Thanks submitters for their feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Ramtran. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Perkins, thank you. Councillor Ramtran, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, and it's a shame Councillor Egan isn't here because she's much more across this than the rest of us, but we've certainly been briefed on it quite in depth, and I think it's been really well put together, as Councillor Duffy mentioned before, and we had former Councillor Anika Van Holsen here during that conversation. The council actually did purchase this land some years ago, and it's been made into open space, it's been made into a community reserve, and Councillor Duffy pointed out that we're really reaping the benefits of that now, and I think she's absolutely right. It's really exciting to see what could become of this land, and this precinct plan really puts it in the right direction. In terms of the changes that I'm proposing, the plan itself does mention the use of exotic trees, and we know that the community certainly prefers the use of indigenous vegetation wherever possible. We have a tree management policy. We're actually going to be reviewing it next financial year, but that tree management policy specifically states that we are to use indigenous and native vegetation, and that exotic vegetation should only ever be used where it's absolutely necessary. So it is, it does seem strange that the plan pretty much explicitly says that we will use exotic trees. I certainly think there's a chance we may have to, and that's absolutely fine, but that's a decision that needs to be made during detailed design. All we've got here is a concept plan, and there'll be a lot more work that needs to go into choosing the exact species that would be appropriate for different parts of the site. And if during that detailed design it's decided that we do need exotic trees, well, that's fine. We will certainly use them. But the preference is for indigenous. That's what our tree management policy says. And by removing that sentence from the plan, we probably won't change the end result too much, but at least we're setting those expectations in line with exactly what the community wants us to do, which is to prioritise indigenous vegetation wherever we can. So I think that change is really important. So I thank officers for all their work on this. I really hope that we can see it realised through some funding. And the reason we're trying to get this through so quickly is so that it'll be ready for the next round of funding from state and federal governments, and hopefully we'll be successful in that and get a really good outcome for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Amtrand. Councillor Perkins.
Yeah, certainly happy to support Councillor Amtrand's motion. I know the ward councillor, Councillor Egan, would have been moving the motion if she was here, but she was an apology tonight. But I'm sure she'll be happy with the minor changes suggested by Councillor Amtrand. In fact, Councillor Egan was part of the council in 2018 that adopted the tree management policy, so there'd be no problem there. Just a couple of items that I have raised with officers, and I think that council and community should consider as well for Grey Sharps Road, is that it is an active sport and recreation area. The Ben Friley Oval, which is the main oval, and council is currently constructing a large pavilion with social club rooms there to replace the old and inadequate club rooms that were there until recently. But the Ben Friley Oval itself is undersized in that Hurstbridge Footy Club can't play finals there. Hurstbridge Footy Club are a very good footy club. They do quite well. They often make finals, but the fact they can't actually play finals on their home ground takes away from their way to generate income, and also to attract that local sponsorship and community support that you would get in a home game. So I think it's not in the master plan, but council has to consider in the future perhaps an extension of the Ben Friley Oval to the south. I understand that needs to be longer, not wider, so it doesn't need to encroach on any of the creekside spaces, but it may have to be a little bit longer. And I have suggested to Elmar and senior officers that even with the installation of lights, which are funded and will go in soon, that those lights should be positioned perhaps away from the boundary on the north and south end to allow for a future expansion of that oval. It would be great to see Hurstbridge Footy Club play finals and ultimately win a grand final on their home ground. That's certainly not possible at the moment. The other thing I look at is the sports ground to the south. Now, any sports ground that's actively used by community, there should be a plan over time to have change rooms and toilets to allow for greater participation, not just for men but also for women. There are no change room facilities or toilets to support that Southern Oval. And just when I look on Google Maps, the Southern Oval is actually not even on Google Maps. But it's certainly a need into the future. And just with the master plan, the concept plan, I think there should be an envelope there or some consideration over time for future planning for not social rooms, because social rooms are already there at the Hurstbridge Football Club social rooms, but it certainly needs toilets and change rooms similar to what has happened at Diamond Creek Smarngrook Oval. You know, it's a support oval for the main oval, Coventry Oval, but that has worked very, very well. That's my only feedback.
Thank you.
Happy to support the motion.
Cheers. Any other councillors hoping to speak to the motion? Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. I won't say a great deal other than I support your amendments, Councillor Amtrand. I do think it's very important to be planting Indigenous plants in the Shire, and I would actually like to see that be a priority rather than just a preferred measure of council. I don't see the need for exotic plants in locations particularly so close to the creeks. I'd like to see us really try and maintain an Indigenous plant canopy wherever we can, and particularly when in our planning provisions for houses we encourage people building and renovating in Nillumbik that trees be significant canopy species and selected from the Live Local, Plant Local, a guide to planting in Nillumbik. So, you know, if we're asking our residents to do this, I would really like to see that council walks the talk and that we plant Indigenous plants as the priority over exotic plants. So I'm hoping that in the concept plan and the detailed design that we see more Indigenous plants and minimal exotic plants in this design. I know that Councillor Egan has this project close to her heart, and it's a shame that she's not here to be able to speak to the motion tonight. one of the other components in this plan is looking at the provision of cultural heritage signage. And I just am reminded that there is a local community group that has asked council to work with the Wurundjeri to come up with a Woiwurrung language word for a park that's close to their location. So in Apollo Parkways, the Friends of Apollo Parkways have asked council to work with Wurundjeri to come up with a name for the rainbow, they call it the Rainbow Snake Park. So it's a park that actually doesn't have a name. And so that's something that council's currently doing. And in terms of cultural heritage signage, maybe one of the things that we could consider in looking at Grey Sharps Road, instead of having it as the Grey Sharps Road open space or play space, or I'm not quite sure what we want to call it, it would be fabulous if we might be able to, as part of the cultural heritage signage project, in this project, look to working with the Wurundjeri to come up with an appropriate place name for this area.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Any other Mayor Eyre?
Thank you, Councillor Payne. I just think it's great that we're able to, well, assuming that this goes through, I'm hoping it will, great to move to the next stage, as this parcel of land has been in the making for many, many years. So it's really exciting with the direction, particularly with the opening of the Diamond Creek to Hurstbridge Trail as well. It will certainly bring more community through to, and maybe tourism as well, through into Hurstbridge, and utilising the businesses, going to cafes and different things too to support our local business. Obviously, we don't want it to be overburdened with people that aren't from the community, but we hope that it is able to be used as a connection point from the trail that's just recently been open. And I just also wanted to say thank you to the Growing Suburbs Fund for the $2 million to going towards this, and that council put in $925,000 for this as well. So hopefully we get this passed just now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Eyre. Any other councillors hoping to speak to the motion? On that basis, I will now put this motion to a vote. All in favour? That motion is passed unanimously. And that brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. We have no supplementary and urgent business. We have no confidential reports. So by the power invested in me, I declare our meeting over for tonight and closing at 9:08 p.m.